Hey Optimancers, Chris here. Wild shape is cool, if not somewhat confusing and unclear. Turn into an animal, start ripping your enemies to shreds, at least if you're a Moon Druid, right at level 2. If you tuned into this video hoping I'll go over multiclassing Barbarian and Moon Druid for the iconic Barbarian, you'll want to go to the video description. That one's got its own video, so I'll link it for you. If you tuned into this video hoping I'll break down how the heck Wild shape even works, you'll also want to check the video description. That one is a doozy, and you'll find a dedicated video on that very juicy topic linked there for you to check out. This video, we're going to be talking about optimizing Wild shape, and we're going to start by talking about what Wild shape forms are best for your Moon Druid at each level of play, and we're going to talk about those results that we're going to get with those forms, and I'll be using the math to back it up. That isn't going to cover everything on optimizing Wild shape. We're going to have to talk about enhancing Wild shape through our racial selection. We're going to have to talk about enhancing Wild shape with our spell selections. We're going to have to talk about enhancing Wild shape with our ability score increases or our feats. We're going to have to talk about enhancing Wild shape through multiclassing, and especially with non-barbarian classes and subclasses. So all that is yet to come. We have a lot to cover, and then we're going to get into some builds where we're really going to focus on Wild shape and do some things that maybe you haven't seen before. If you enjoy this content and would be interested in supporting it, please find the link to my Patreon page in the video description. Patrons see these videos early and without YouTube ads. Additional perks, depending on your level of support, include an exclusive Discord community, as well as a monthly video callout, as these patrons are about to get right now. Airhead, Alex R., Vo, Brian Gardner, Chris C., Coral, Daniel Sturgeon, Dank Train, Dewey Cheatham and Howe, Douglas Reynolds, Eden the DM, Eric Wasserman, FBK05. And I'll do my best here. Shadaman, Hella, Gishlife, Lightfoot, Hendry, Heisenberger, Jay Gemmel, James Mackla, James Sprague, Jean-Baptiste Blanchette, John Matera, Jonathan Zucker, Joseph Van Horn, Justin Times, Lars V, Mark D, Mark Sexton, Math Guy Dave, Mr. Brett, PCZ, Pedro DeBaca, Ramen Goblin, Scott Parsons, Sig, Tazel, Thunderlock, Vu, and William Whittles. Thanks all so much for your support. Let's get going. Alright, let's get started with which forms we want to take with our Wild shape feature. Now in my last video I discussed how the rules for Wild shape work, or how I think they work, tried to wrap my head around it, and one of the things I mentioned was there's a rule that says that you can only transform into a beast that you have seen before. And I said what I do with that, because it's really hard to know what beasts a druid has seen before, is that I limit the players to certain source books that I lay out at the beginning of the campaign. So yes, you can use the Monster Manual, you can use Monsters of the Multiverse, whatever. The reason you definitely want to do that and not just leave it wide open is because if the players can just access any official source, you get some very, very weird stuff. So here is the enormous tentacle. This is a huge beast. It is challenge rating 2. That means a Moon Druid could access it at level 6. We're going to see this feature called enormous tentacle. It can reach anywhere inside this room. Now, that makes sense if we're talking about the adventure for which this is placed. It does not make sense in any other case. So if you are going to have a room that's 1,000 feet wide, the enormous tentacle shouldn't be able to reach anywhere in the room. It doesn't make sense. But this isn't even the worst case. Here's Onyx. This is a challenge rating 0 beast. So any druid could access this form if it was allowed, which it obviously shouldn't be because relative size says any damage Onyx would take is reduced to 0. Again, this is built for a specific encounter in a specific adventure. It doesn't work in the general sense, and we're going to find all kinds of stuff. I would really strongly recommend when you consider your sources, don't allow any adventures for sure, because the adventures, those monsters are often built for a specific encounter, and in a general setting, you run into problems. Just wanted to start with that. Let's get going on the good stuff. At level 2, we can select any challenge rating 1 beast that doesn't have a swim or a fly speed. And we have a lot of good options. And don't get used to that, by the way. Here are the standout forms and the relative advantages of each of them. First, let's start with our most sturdy option, the Giant Hyena. That's 45 hit points. That's going to be close to twice some of the forms I'm going to be highlighting, and higher than anybody else in your party by a country mile. So this one just doesn't like to go down. 50-foot movement speed, nice speed, and we have a fairly solid attack. The main issue with this form is there's no multi-attack, but we do get the potential opportunity to attack a second time with the Rampage feature. This says if we reduce a creature to 0 hit points with a melee attack, we can use our bonus action to move up to half our speed, giving us a total movement of 75 on our turn, and make a second attack. Mainly though, if you want as many hit points as possible, this is the wild shape form for you. Second up, let's talk about attacks, because Deinonychus gets 3 of them. With multi-attack, they get 1 bite attack and 2 claw attacks. But why stop at 3 when we can use Pounce? This feature allows us, when we move at least 20 feet straight towards a creature, and then hit it with a claw attack, and we get 2 chances at that, then the target makes a strength saving throw or gets knocked prone, and if it's prone, we get a bonus action bite attack for 4 attacks in the round. If a target is already prone before you pounce, then you get that bonus action attack automatically. So if that Rune Knight in your party grappled and shoved prone an enemy, pounce, get 4 attacks with advantage, and steal that kill. By the way, with a movement score of 40, that is enough to back up 20 feet and then pounce again on your next turn. Another advantage of Deinonychus is it's medium-sized, so if you're in tight quarters, this is the wild shape you want. There is a similar form in Eberron, Rising of the Last War, called the Clawfoot. It gets pack tactics, but it has 1 less attack and very weak hit points, the lowest that we're going to cover. When it comes to neat tricks, though, the Giant Spider is the ultimate CR1 form. Webwalker allows the Giant Spider to walk through web spells with no issues. Spider Climb allows you to climb on the walls and ceilings. You get Blind Sight, 10 feet, if you want to play around with fog clouds or magical darkness. As long as the opponent isn't immune to poison, the extra poison damage will largely cover the disadvantage of making only 1 attack. Finally, Web is a rechargeable attack that gives you a range attack of 30 feet or 60 feet with disadvantage, and if it hits, the target is restrained. This lasts until the creature uses their action to free themselves, in which case they need to make a DC 12 strength check, or they do damage to the web, which is honestly probably the easier way of freeing themselves. Still, that's an attack on webbing instead of you or your allies. But if you want just a nice balanced out form, the Brown Bear is the classic. 34 hit points is lower than the Hyena, but higher than any other creature on this list. 40-foot movement, perfectly respectable. 2 attacks with their action with a strong +6 to hit, and pretty decent damage with those attacks. If you aren't looking for some specific feature or specialty, the Brown Bear is that form that is pretty durable and pretty good with attacks. And that gets you all the way to level 6. Once we hit level 6, we have challenge rating 2 forms available, swim speeds become okay, and really importantly, our attacks ignore resistance or immunity to non-magical damage. The bad news, though, is the jump from CR1 to CR2 when it comes to beast forms, it's not that great. Especially since it took us 4 levels to get this far. The list of CR2 beasts is not big, and multi-attack, other than some very minor bear form improvements, is basically non-existent. So let's look at those bears. The cave and polar bear are basically the same. There is only one difference between these 2 forms. The cave bear has dark vision. So, I guess take the cave bear form. Here's how it's better than the brown bear. It has 8 more hit points, which is still lower than the CR1 Giant Hyena, by the way. It has dark vision, a swim speed, +1 to hit, and +1 damage. So it is better than the brown bear, but it's not dramatically better. For hit points, our new champion, though, is the Plesiosaurus. 68 hit points, that's a lot of hit points. The land speed is not great, so this form does do better in the water, but it works okay on land. It has just 1 attack, though. Does decent damage with that attack, but offensively, this isn't going to match the bear forms. Not having multi-attack is really the Achilles heel of most CR2 forms, except maybe one which has no multi-attack, but its 1 attack is really, really good. And that's the giant constrictor snake. Now this is a huge sized beast, so if we're in tight quarters, it's a terrible choice. But if we have the room, 60 hit points is still really good, and our constrict attack does 13 damage on average and grapples and restrains our enemy. Blindsight 10 feet allows for fog cloud or darkness shenanigans, and we've got a bite attack, which is just a lot worse, though it does have a 10-foot reach if that's an issue. This form is not going to match the damage of the bear forms, but restraining enemies is really good. It gives you advantage to hit and them disadvantage to hit you. And of course, they can't move. Escaping requires their action. With a DC of 16, it's not an easy check either. In my opinion, this is the strongest option at level 6. Fortunately, we only have 3 levels this time, till our next forms are available at level 9. Unfortunately, there's only one form really worth looking at, and that's a giant scorpion. Armor class 15, it's still not great, but it's better than what we've been seeing up to now. 40-foot movement speed is okay. 52 hit points. It's actually a step down from the giant constrictor snake or the plesiosaurus. What we get instead, though, is a 3-attack multi-attack, and every attack gets a rider. Before we get into the attacks, though, 60-foot blind sight right here. Okay, so 2 claw attacks and 1 sting. The claws automatically grapple any target they hit, and the sting does very, very potent 4d10 additional poison damage with a save for half. Here's the thing you need to know about the giant scorpion, though. You really want advantage to hit. Attack prone enemies, or enemies in magical fog, or something, because +4 to hit is not good at this level. I mean, it's not good at any level, but especially at this level. Again, like with level 6, this isn't a big upgrade. You could even question if it's an upgrade at all. Here's the good thing, though. When you're level 9, level 10 is just 1 level away. And at level 10, we get Elemental Wild Shape. This allows us to expand 2 uses of Wild Shape and take the form of an air, water, earth, or fire elemental. This is worth those 2 uses. With 10 levels of Druid, you can last in elemental form for up to 5 hours, then you can do it again after a short rest, so those 2 uses is not catastrophic. And elementals are so much better than beasts. Honestly, until level 20, I'll say right now that these become your best wild shape forms. Better than any CR4 beast, which you won't have access to until level 12 anyways. Better than any CR5 beast, which you won't have access to until level 15 anyways. And even better than CR6 beasts. Or I should say beast, because there is only one option. We're going to go over all 4 elementals, but they aren't even in my view. I think there's a winner, but there's still reasons you might want the other forms in specific situations. So here's the 4 forms, and I'm going to go over each way these forms are really good, but when some are better than others, they get 1 point. Let's see who ends out on top. Let's start with hit points. Earth gets 126, water 114, fire 102, air 90. Our winner, the Earth Elemental. Armor class, Earth has 17, air 15, water 14, fire 13, Earth wins again. Initiative bonus, air gets +5, fire gets +3, water gets +2, Earth gets -1, air is the winner. Movement speed, water gets 30 and a swim speed of 90, fire gets 50, Earth gets 30 and a burrow of 30, and air gets fly 90 with hover. I think the obvious winner there, air. Now let's talk about some special stuff. So only one of them has a damage vulnerability, and that is the Earth Elemental with Thunder. Lose 1 point. They all have resistance to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, so let's give them all a point. Resistance to lightning, air. Resistance to thunder, air. Resistance to acid, water. Immunity to poison, universal. Immunity to fire, fire. Condition immunities. They all have exhaustion immunity. Air, water, and fire are immune to grappled. All of them are immune to paralyzed. All of them are immune to petrified. Air, water, and fire are immune to prone. They're all immune to poisoned. Air, water, and fire are immune to restrained. And they are all immune to unconscious. For damage, earth and air are tied for the most, followed by water and then fire at the bottom, though fire does have an additional way to do some damage. But even with that, it falls below earth and air. And there are some other things. So air, water, and fire move through 1-inch spaces, and they can move through and stop in a hostile creature's space. Air has a whirlwind attack, recharge 5 to 6, can target multiple creatures, can fling them 20 feet, do damage, and knock prone. Water has a Whelm attack, recharges 5 to 6, grapples and restrains, and does damage, and it can target multiple creatures. Fire does continual fire damage by stopping a creature's space or after they hit it with an attack. It also illuminates like a lantern. Earth can move through unworked earth, and stone does double damage to objects and structures. Now I get that these things aren't all exactly equal, like fire immunity is better than resistance to any kind of damage. I'd say the water whelm attack is better than, say, the whirlwind attack from air. But regardless of our point totals, I think it should be obvious, I think that all 4 of these are pretty good. And depending on what situation you're in, any of them might be the answer for you. If you need to glide through Earth, then Earth Elemental is your best choice. I would say that generally speaking, I tend to lean towards the Air Elemental. With the most damage, with the most resistances, with tied for the most condition immunities, and that super beefy fly speed. I just think that all those things put together just make the Air Elemental kind of the complete package. Another thing I'll say about all these elementals, though, is I think they're better than any other form you can take with the Moon Druid, and not just at 10th level. I think they are the best forms you can take for the Moon Druid at any level. The highest challenge rating beast we can ever take, and this is at 18th level, is the Mammoth. The Mammoth has 126 hit points, which is equivalent to the Earth Elemental, but it doesn't have any damage resistances. So it really probably has closer to half as many hit points in terms of practical hit points. And it has no condition immunities, it has no damage immunities. It does do a bit more damage, but that alone I just don't think makes it equivalent to the elemental forms. So let's move to our second topic, the results you can expect at different levels. So I'm going to be using my baseline damage, which is basically a Warlock using Eldritch Blast with Agonizing Blast and the Hex spell. And these are the average damages you could expect at the various levels of play. Let's see how Wild Shape compares. So at level 2, if we take, I'm just going to use the Brown Bear because it's easy, 65% chance to hit, 19.5 total damage of the 2 attacks is 12.68. Then if we add our criticals, it's 0.58 for a total DPR of 13.26 against the baseline of 7.65. That is 73% over the baseline at level 2. That is crazy good. And considering that we're playing a full caster in addition, and that we can do this twice per short rest, it's just insanely good. I would say it's potentially broken. In fact, you're not going to find me playing Moon Druids at level 2 because not only am I out damaging the rest of the characters, I can also take so much more damage than all of them that you tend to overshadow the other players, and I don't like to do that. Level 5, things even out a lot because our Brown Bear now only has a 55% chance to hit, and I often get asked how, if damage doesn't go down and your to hit doesn't go down, how does DPR go down? The reason it goes down is because I assume the target armor class is going up with our levels, so if we're not increasing our chance to hit, then our total damage on average is going to go down. So we have 55% chance to hit times the 19.5 damage is 10.73. Then add our crits for another 0.58, and our damage drops to 11.31, and our baseline went up. So now instead of 73% over, we're all the way down to 31% under. That is a huge, huge drop. Now, it does do more damage than if we were to, say, throw a cantrip. So if we were to throw a D8 cantrip, I'd expect to be doing about 5.85 damage per round. So it is better than that. And we can enhance this. And the way that a druid can enhance their damage while wild-shaped is to cast a spell before they wild-shape that can do more damage for them. So let's say even like Conjure Animals is going to be by far the most damage we can add. But let's be far more modest than that. We're going to only use a second level slot, cast a Flaming Sphere. Flaming Sphere on average does 7 points of damage if they fail their save, or 3.5 if they make it. And so that gives us 5.25 additional damage per round, uses our bonus action, which we weren't using for anything else. And so if we take our 11.31 plus the 5.25, that alone gets us to baseline. Barely over baseline, but it gets us there. If we look at level 8, if we were the Plesiosaurus, then we have a 50% chance to hit, times 14.5 damage. That's 7.25. Add our crits for 0.53. That is 7.78. Not very good. Our best DPR at level 8 is probably the Cave Bear, actually, because of multi-attack. So now we're getting our DPR up to 12.41. That's still 30% under the baseline, though. But let's enhance that. Let's say we were to cast Guardian of Nature. So Guardian of Nature is going to give us advantage on our attacks. It is also going to give us additional force damage whenever we hit with an attack. So suddenly we have an 80% chance to hit, and we're doing 22.8 damage plus 1.85 from criticals. We're up to 24.65, and that takes us all the way from 30% under baseline to 39% over baseline. At level 10, we have our elemental forms, and as I mentioned already, the highest damage we're going to get are Earth and Air, which are tied. They each are doing 16.3 magical bludgeoning damage. That is just barely below the baseline. Water does a fair bit less at 13.9 magical bludgeoning, and then fire does only 9.7, but as long as we end our turn in the enemy's space, they take an additional d10 damage, so we can easily get that to 15.2, which is still below Earth and Air, and it does fire damage, which is significantly less reliable than magical bludgeoning. But now, even just with a second level Flaming Sphere, we're easily exceeding the baseline. Now, as I already said, I think the elemental forms are the best forms you can get at any level, though there is some reason why you might want to consider a Mammoth if you do get to a level 18 in Druid. Mainly, of course, it only uses one use of your Wild Shape, which has an effect at level 18 and 19. Level 20, it doesn't matter so much. But let's just look at the damage for the Mammoth. So for the base attack, it's not that great. You got 50% chance to hit, 29 damage for 14.5 at crits. We're looking at 15.6 DPR at level 18. That's not good. But if we do our Trampling Charge, now we have 50% chance to hit with a 25 damage attack for 12.5 plus our crits for 13.45. But then we have our additional attack. And we have a 50% chance to hit on the initial attack, but the second attack, assuming the person is prone, should have a 75% chance to hit. So we can use 38% times 29, which is the average damage, for 11.02, add our crits onto that, and now we get to 25.57. That still doesn't reach the baseline on its own, so you are going to need to enhance it in additional ways for it to be effective. You can't just play a vanilla Moon Druid with no special feats, no spells, and expect to be delivering a lot of damage. However, if an enemy happens to be prone, then we can actually deliver pretty decent damage even without any additional effects. So we've got a 75% chance to hit then for 18.75 damage at our crits. Then our second attack, now we're taking 75% chance to hit on the first attack, 75% chance to hit on the second attack, so we got a 56% chance of delivering this damage, and we add it all together, and now we're up to 38.54, so we're above the baseline, and we haven't enhanced this damage in any way. So the potential is there to do a lot of damage with the Mammoth, but now it is time to talk about the elephant in the room, or perhaps I should say, the Mammoth in the room. So look at our armor class here. It's 13, 126 hit points is a lot of hit points. However, if you go into combat at level 18 with an armor class of 13 and you're a big, huge mammoth and you're stomping things and goring things, you're going to get attacked. And with an armor class of 13, you're going to get hit. And with no special defenses, you're going to be taking a lot of damage. And that means you will be making a lot of concentration saves, because these numbers on their own, along with all the numbers we've seen pretty much since level 5, the Wild Shape on its own is not delivering enough damage for that to be your primary purpose. Instead, the Wild Shape must be supplemented with some other way to contribute. And usually that is going to be spells. You are a full spellcaster. So what you have to do is you have to cast a spell, and then you have to Wild Shape, and then concentrate on it while you're Wild Shaped. This mammoth is going to have a hard time maintaining concentration. It's going to get hit all the time, it's going to take a lot of damage, and we have to make a concentration save every time. In fact, concentration is going to be one of your primary challenges if you're playing a wild-shaped character, because you will have to rely on those spells. And if you lose concentration, you cannot cast again in Wild Shape. That means you have to drop your Wild Shape. If you don't have any more Wild Shapes, now you're not really a Moon Druid anymore, you're a subclassless Druid, which isn't terrible. I mean, you're a full caster at high levels, you can get by with just your Druid spells, because Druid spells actually are pretty good. But if we want to play this character, we want to be using Wild Shape. So these numbers need to be supplemented with spells to deliver a whole more effective character. And that means we need to maintain concentration on whatever we cast beforehand. These are decisions we will have to address when we do builds for this kind of character. So concentration is really, really important. It's important for any caster in the game, but other casters in the game, if they lose concentration, they can potentially just cast the spell again. We don't have it that easy. So that needs to be part of our focus as we continue to look at how to optimize this feature. How are we going to maintain concentration? Are there methods other than spells that we can use to enhance our damage and effectiveness in Wild Shape? Because if we can, then maybe we can avoid the concentration mechanic altogether, which would be fantastic. So as we go into our next video, we will be talking about our racial selection, which is kind of a messy topic. If you think you know how racial features interact with Wild Shape, maybe you haven't watched my previous video, because I do discuss it, and it is very confusing. But what I will be using is the guidance from Jeremy Crawford on how racial features interact with Wild Shape, and it's going to give us some pretty odd results. So I hope you'll join me for that next video. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.